Hey everyone, this is Kevin, your failed journalist, and this is a video that has actually been on the To Make doc for quite a bit of time. As you may know, some of you have actually been following my channel because I did a Disney tier ranking video. Now, these tier ranking videos are not original. I didn't invent them. I'm certainly not unique to them. I don't even make the best ones. However, these tier ranking videos are fun for subscribers because it kind of gives you a little insight into their tastes. And obviously, when I ranked the Disney movies, that caused a lot of discussion. So a lot of you were really gracious about things that you disagreed on. Some people were a little obsessive about what we disagreed on, but overall, most people felt that it was just good fun. Well, people have been asking me, I should say, to do the Pixar movies. Like, where would I rank the Pixar movies? And I kind of held off on that for a little bit because the Pixar movies are, for the most part, of much consistent higher quality than some of the Disney films are. But, you know, with some recent movies and recent years going on where there's been more sequel dependent and they have not been on the winning streak that they once were, I figured, you know, maybe now is the time to actually rank the Pixar movies. Now, here's the thing. I am going to rank them as best as I can remember from the year on which they were released. If I get a movie out of place here and there, I'm sorry, I'm doing this all from the top of my head. Please forgive me. But we are now going to rank from A to F. And then you have S for the true diamonds in the rough, the super gems of which, frankly, your life would probably be a little bit worse if you'd never seen the movie, or at least if I'd never seen the movie. So let's start with, Toy Story. That was the number one, and you know, we get off on a really good foot. Toy Story is an A film. Now, granted, the computer animation has not aged as well. This one's clearly the most dated out of all the Pixar movies. Starting with A Bug's Life, I would say, is when the animation really started to shine. Toy Story looks rough around the edges, but it was a great starting point for the studio. It, you know, established great characters. That screenplay was wonderful. It had that, you know, generational, love. Like, both kids and adults loved it. So Toy Story was a great first start. Interestingly, I think they stumbled a little after that because I think A Bug's Life is kind of a tier C film. And one of the reasons is, I have to admit, I was a little spoiled. When Bug's Life came out, this was the year of the dueling bug movies. DreamWorks was releasing Ants, and Pixar was releasing A Bug's Life. I was probably 12 or 13 when these movies came out, which is kind of scary to think of right now. I saw Ants first and was blown away, not necessarily by the animation, but the writing and the wit and the story. I mean, the fact that it was about an ant looking for his place in life, and, you know, ants are basically meant to be insignificant. And I really thought Ants had a very, very clever screenplay. A Bug's Life was not nearly as compelling, to be frank. Although as an older person, I appreciate that it is based off Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai. That's something I didn't notice as a kid. I noticed that as an adult, so that's pretty cool. But while I did feel A Bug's Life had better animation than Ants, I thought Z was a much better character than Flick. In terms of the villains, okay, Hopper by Kevin Spacey was more threatening, of course, but I think Gene Hackman as the general was more menacing, if that makes sense. I even kind of like how Christopher Walken had like a serious role in an animated film, of all things, with Ants, and it's like kind of reminded you that, yeah, he's actually a good actor. Again, nothing really wrong with A Bug's Life per se. I just thought it was it wasn't great, in my opinion. But moving on, I felt that they did much better with Monsters, Inc. Give Monsters, Inc. a B. I do think the story was a little simplistic in some areas, but that aside, I really liked Mike and Sully. And, you know, the world was creative, and, you know, even that, the way that it ended. I think Monsters, Inc. was the first ending for a Pixar film that kind of showed that they might actually hit you a little bit harder in the heart on the way out the door than most animated films were. But yeah, I really liked Monsters Inc. So then we get to Toy Story 2, and I think Toy Story 2 is definitely a super. I think that was better than Toy Story. And what it showed was that Pixar could not only create worlds, but it could expand worlds. And keep in mind, we're talking about toys, and toys, by necessity, have very limited world views. It's usually confined to a room. But the idea that, Woody was a collector's toy that was passed on from generation to generation, what happens to those toys when kids grow up and leave them behind? You actually start feeling bad for some of the toys you left behind, like how I just so casually gave them to a Goodwill. And so I think Toy Story 2 was a winner above and beyond. Then you get to Finding Nemo. I would also put Finding Nemo as an S. Finding Nemo was just, wonderful. I'm still amazed to this day that the whole memory loss thing with Dory, how, she has short-term memory loss, that could have gotten old really fast, and it never got old. I like the whole idea about parents letting go. I actually saw this movie with my dad when I was kind of on the verge of becoming my own person. Driver's license, hanging out with friends. I still made time to go to the movies with dad. We saw this movie, and not only did we find it to be very funny, I think it was, hit him a little bit here because he was starting to let me go and become my own person. So, I have great memories of that, and, Finding Nemo was just wonderful. Then we have The Incredibles. I think that is an A-tier film. Oops, sorry, that's Incredibles 2. This is The Incredibles. It's interesting because when The Incredibles came out, superhero movies were in many ways just getting started. And by just getting started, I mean that, we'd only had like a few Batman movies and Spider-Man movies. And Marvel was really just getting started. And Brad Bird created what was essentially a spoof of superhero movies while also creating his own legitimate superhero movie. And those are always the best kind. Think Galaxy Quest, that kind of starts off cheekily ribbing Star Trek and Star Trek fans before becoming essentially the best Star Trek film we'd had in many years. So that was what The Incredibles did, and I loved it quite a bit. One caveat I have with Incredibles, I hear that the project was originally supposed to be a 2D film, and watching it, I kind of feel like maybe it would have been a little better had it stayed a 2D film, but Pixar wasn't equipped for 2D animation, so there you have that. Now, the next one you have to talk about is Cars, I believe. And so now we have to move on to Cars. And Cars, I'm going to give that a C. Not terrible, but it's a little underwhelming. Here's the thing that I'm going to admit, though. Interestingly, I do tear up a little bit when I watch Cars. When they kind of get to the point where, this town had been forgotten because of the freeway and that life had kind of died, but it's their home. That part always gets to me. But otherwise, Cars is pretty much a Doc Hollywood ripoff. If any of you have never seen Doc Hollywood, Michael J. Fox film. But it's cute. It's not terrible, but it was certainly not memorable, except for the fact that it was underwhelming. But boy, would it become memorable later on in life. Because now after Cars, they made Ratatouille, and I would consider Ratatouille to be an S-grade film, an S-tier film, I should say. I really liked the idea of how, this rat wants to do something that he's typically not supposed to do. And as someone who has written film criticism and film historian articles, who was actually the resident film critic for a couple newspapers, I liked the Antoine Ego critic, who basically was snooty to the new and thought that his opinion was all that, and then he was completely taken surprise by the Ratatouille dish, which was a peasant dish. I think that scene has always been some good perspective, if you will, for me when I write my movie reviews. And, Ratatouille just nailed a lot of things extremely well. Now then, after Ratatouille, I think it was Up. Or maybe it was before Ratatouille was Up. I don't know. Oh, I missed one. I missed one. I told you I was probably going to miss one. But Wally, and the page. I'm sorry, folks. This keeps happening. Like, so, anyway, the page. Wally is an S tier movie too. In fact, one of the most interesting thing about Wally is that it really clued me into how good of a storytellers Pixar really were at doing this, because the vast majority of the first half of Wall-E is silent. There's no dialogue, and it's just images. And when there's no dialogue at a kids' film, kids tend to get a little antsy. You can definitely see that they're not enjoying themselves. And Wall-E showed that kids would sit through silence if it was done well. And Wall-E was just done extremely well. And, it had an environmental message that, like, I'm not the biggest environmentalist in the world, but I'm a little bit of an environmentalist. And it just made sense. And it explained the trash problem that we had in a way that was simple but effective. That basically, where are we going to put all this stuff? And Wall-E and Eve were just a very, very cute couple. So I really liked Wall-E quite a bit. Now then, speaking of another cute couple, Up. Also an S movie. Now, I will admit, the talking dogs are weird. And yet, Up was like one of the first movies that Pixar did, and it wouldn't be their only one, that kind of showed that life itself was the journey. That you don't quite reach your goals sometimes. It doesn't mean your life wasn't worth living. And I think that is just such a powerful message, and it's a really good message to be sharing with kids and family members. Absolutely wonderful. Now, I believe the next movie on the list was Cars 2, and Cars... No. Of course Cars is going to be the F. Cars 2 was where Pixar completely halted, grid to a halt, their quality streak. Even with lesser movies here and there, Cars 2 brought it to a stop. Like, that showed that Pixar could do wrong. I mean, and the thing is like, the first car movie was about basically a high-speed race car racer who needed to slow down, smell the roses, and appreciate life. It kind of showed that the fast and the famous lifestyle was not all that it was cracked up to be, and that the simple pleasures in life could really bring warmth and healing to a soul and fill a void that was there. Cars 2 completely destroyed that meaning by making it about high-speed car chases, a spy mission, and basically that, oh, look at how dumb Mater is. Like, look at how he's responding. And, here's the thing. I know that Cars 2 message is supposed to be like, well, you are you, and you should not have to, worry about what other people say. But then, when you go to some of these other cultures, like Japan, which I've been to, and you're acting the way you are in a culture that acts a certain way. You know what? Here's the thing. I know it's very, common for Americans to say, like, you be you, and if everyone else feels this way, that's their problem. But you go to a culture like Japan, which is built on respect and conformity and, just being polite, and you basically act like a entitled jackass. I'm sorry, but Mater deserves to be called out on this. Like, embarrassment in Japan is not just like, oh, he's embarrassing. It's like, no, you are insulting the country that is hosting you. So Cars 2 just got so much wrong, and I was actually quite surprised that John Lasseter let this happen. Because Lasseter, you might recall, directed Toy Story 2. He collaborated on the story pitches for, Nemo and Wall-E and Ratatouille, and basically he also directed Cars 1. But look, he directed Cars 1 and he didn't see what was wrong with Cars 2. That is amazing to me. So yeah, Cars 2, pretty bad. Yeah, just pretty bad overall. However, that would not be the end of Pixar, obviously, because shortly afterwards, I think it was Monsters University. And Monsters University was, I'm going to put D. Yeah, I'm going to put that one in a D. I mean, look, I like Mike and Sully, but here's the thing. Monsters University was the Monsters Incorporated movie nobody wanted to have. Nobody cared what their lives were like before they joined Monsters, Inc. Nobody cared about younger Mike and younger Sully. They just didn't. And it's just, I don't even know what the point of Monsters University was. I mean, basically, maybe it's the whole thing that, Mike wants to reach for his dream of being a scarer. He's not going to be a scarer, and he's okay with that. Well, Pixar made a movie much later on that conveyed that message a heck of a lot better. But it was also a little derivative of Up, and it's like, it didn't do nearly as good a job as Up did at convincing you that life was the journey itself. I don't know what the point of Monsters University was. The only reason it's not an F, to be honest, is because it's not like it was insultingly bad. It was just so uninteresting for the most part. Now then, moving on from that, we had Brave, which I think Brave is a C-level movie. And one of the problems with Brave is that there was a lot of studio interference in the background, and I think knowing that made this a little worse for me. But I didn't think it was a very compelling film. I think it could have been. The idea of like a mother and daughter journey towards mutual respect is a good one. One of the problems is that Brenda Chapman, who was a co-director of The Prince of Egypt, by the way, was removed from this movie and replaced with a male director. Now, I'm not saying a male director can't make a movie about a strong female protagonist. It's happened many, many times before, and it will continue to happen. But the thing is, Brave was like a very personal story for Brenda Chapman. She based the main character off her own daughter and the struggle she was having with her. And having a replacement director convey that same meaning is going to be difficult, to be honest. Also, if you want to know how mismanaged this was, the original title of this movie is called The Bear and the Bow, which is poetic when you get down to it, because essentially what it means in context of the film is the title is Mother and Daughter. But someone decided that Bear and the Bow would not be an appealing name to boys, who this movie, let's be frank, was not made for in the first place. So they decided to call it Brave, a title which means absolutely nothing as far as I'm concerned. So, okay movie, but is it great by any means? No, it's not. Now then, let's talk about Toy Story 3, the second Pixar film to get a Best Picture nomination. And see, I mean, here's the funny thing about Toy Story 3. I know this one's probably going to be the most controversial choice on this video because a lot of people cried during this movie. And I'll be honest, I did too. The beginning of the movie got me, and the end of the movie, I was bawling. The problem is the middle of the movie. Like the stuff during the daycare, the stuff with Lotso Bear. It was marginally interesting. Didn't have anything to do with the message of growing up and leaving behind childhood things. I don't know why you need to have like a daycare center that was run by the mafia, essentially, to make a compelling Toy Story 3. I mean, villains had kind of been in short supply in this series for the most part. I mean, you had Sid, who blew up toys, and you had Stinky Pete, I guess. But Toy Story's strengths was more about how the characters felt, and having a bunch of toddlers play with kids, not really my thing. That said, Mexican Buzz was hilarious. So, moving on from that, I think, and I know I'm already getting the order of these movies way out of whack, but let's go to The Good Dinosaur. I'm going to give that a D as well. The Good Dinosaur had some of the best animation that Pixar had ever produced. I just don't understand why whenever they make a dinosaur movie, it's always like a kid dinosaur who loses a parent, who falls away from the flock, who has to find his way back home. I mean, I think the original concept of The Good Dinosaur was a good one. Like, what if the meteor didn't strike Earth and dinosaurs survived? What would the world look like? And apparently, it would look the same as if it was the time before the meteor struck the Earth. I don't understand why they went with the most generic route possible. This one also had a director change, like Bob Peterson, who voiced Doug in Up and co-wrote that screenplay, was supposed to do this one, and he was pulled off the project and a new guy was put in his place. I don't know why they did that. I don't know why. Whatever he was working on had to have been more inspiring than this. But who knows? So anyway, so we got that. We got The Good Dinosaur. What about Inside Out? Inside Out is an S. We're going back to the S's. And there's no words on how positively. I cannot stress how good Inside Out is. I actually remember picking it as the best film of the year. I love the concept of how emotions are dealt with, what makes people tick. I even kind of like how they almost kind of just kind of like describe to kids like, depression, really. Like, it just feels like the joy's been sucked out of my soul. And, joy and sadness is gone, and I just don't know what to feel now because these other feelings don't compensate. I cannot tell you how many times I've cried during this movie. I've watched it multiple times. This is actually, I'm going to be honest, this is probably my favorite Pixar movie. I think Inside Out is probably my favorite Pixar movie. It used to be Ratatouille, but then this came out, and I loved Inside Out. Now, fortunately, when you go on that high of a note, you're going to go to a few lows afterwards. And so we started to see more lows. Because Finding Dory, I got to put that on a D2. I debated putting that on C, but when I think about it, I really didn't enjoy that movie very much. And I think it's the only movie aside from Cars 2 that Pixar made that I did not actually finish a full second viewing of. Bought the disc. It's on the shelf. Blu-ray 3D, everything. I couldn't bring myself to watch it a second time. It was just that uninteresting to me. Then you have Cars 3. Now, Cars 3 I actually liked. I like Cars 3 quite a bit. I thought that was the logistical sequel to Cars 1. And in fact, it seems a lot of people at Pixar felt that way because it's funny. Like, when I showed these movies to my wife, because she somehow hadn't seen the Cars movies, we watched Cars, and then we watched Cars 3. And she had no inclination that anything was missing. And it's funny when you watch Cars 3, it seems to go out of its way to pretend that Cars 2 never happened. It's an embarrassment they don't even want to acknowledge. Yeah, they got to put the 3 there. But yeah, Cars 2 is where the logistical progression of where these characters should have gone. Doc Hudson is gone. The new generations come up, and now Lightning McQueen is kind of finding his new role as a mentor, finding out that he can't be on top as he used to be. That's a good story. So, I mean, it's obviously not an A story, but it's pretty good. All right, let's move on to Coco. And Coco, I would put as a B. Yeah, B. I will say that Coco, it was kind of nice to see like an original movie after a while. And Coco was very creative with the Land of the Dead and everything. I don't know if it was as deep as it could have been. I mean, who knows? I'm not on these storyboard meetings. But yeah, Coco was a good one. And it had like an interesting little twist at the end. So yeah, I like Coco. Now, Incredibles 2... A lot of people... I'm going to put that as a B, but I'm going to say Incredibles 2 was pretty darn disappointing. I mean, there was like no sequel for The Incredibles for a very, very long time because Brad Bird insisted, I will not make an Incredibles 2 until I have a story that I feel like I need to tell. And when I look at that, it's like, so basically the story you needed to tell was the same story you told last time, except with Mrs. Incredible instead of Mr. Incredible, like the roles are reversed. Like, how can that be? You know what I think happened? I think what happened is Brad Bird made Tomorrowland. It didn't do very well, and so he needed another hit. Pixar and Disney wanted an Incredibles 2, so he basically said, all right, I'll make Incredibles 2. I'll have another hit on my hand, and then I can make whatever movie I want to make after that. Again, not bad. I put it as a B, and, a twist villain and everything. It wasn't really much of a twist. But, yeah, so there you go. Incredibles 2 I thought was like pretty disappointing. Now, Onward, it's kind of a shame. I wanted to like Onward a heck of a lot more than I did. It was nice that A, it was an original movie, and B, unlike The Good Dinosaur, where they had like a radical concept and didn't really follow through on it, Onward did follow through with that radical concept. Like, what happens if technology comes in and people are using magic and they decide that technology is, quite frankly, easier and safer to do? Great idea. They followed through with it. The problem is, what happens is that the world becomes pedestrian. It becomes pedestrian. It becomes milquetoast. And I didn't care. I just didn't care. Now, it did have one of the endings that was a little tearjerker, which is what moved it up a little bit. But I was always surprised to be seeing all these fantastical creatures, these wondrous sets, and they're basically driving around in a van, not doing anything that makes them special. Like, you know, where is the magical wonderment of this movie that's supposed to be? So, it was also one of the last movies I saw in theaters before the pandemic hit. So that, who knows? I thought that was kind of a shame that was one of the last I saw. But anyway, yeah, didn't like Onward too much. Now, Toy Story 4, I like Toy Story 4 quite a bit. In fact, I believe Toy Story 4 is what Toy Story 3 should have been. That is the logical conclusion of bringing the whole what happens to toys when the owners grow up and move on. Now, Bonnie didn't grow up, but she moved on. She didn't want to play with Woody as much anymore. And what is the toy's purpose in life if the kid does not want to play him? I like the idea that they actually have a term for lost toys and what that means to a toy. So I really like Toy Story 4. I think that should have been... That is a logical conclusion to the story, and I really hope now that they don't make any more. And then we have Soul. Well, here's the thing. Soul is a much newer film, so the sands of time have not brought it full circle yet. However, I am going to put it in the S category. I think it will be a classic. Soul was definitely the movie I needed during the pandemic. Now, make no mistake, I would have much rather seen this in theaters, don't get me wrong. But it was very therapeutic because during this pandemic, you know, we're stuck indoors. I'm not applying for jobs the way I would used to. I'm not reaching for my dreams. House hunting has to be put on hold, things like that. And so it's like, man, life is just being wasted right now because of this pandemic. And then a movie like Soul comes along to remind us that no, everyday living is life. I mean, what other movie can you think of where like the main character reaches his dream, his lifelong dream, and he says, I honestly thought it would be a little different. Like, because you know what? Yeah, we can have our dreams, and our dreams can make us happy, but really, it's the people in our lives and what we do every day, life in general. That's what makes life worth living. This was what I think Monsters University really failed to do, but Soul did masterfully. So anyway, let's look at this list one more time. Under the S tier, and there's a lot of them, we have Toy Story 2, Finding Nemo, Ratatouille, WALL-E, Up, Inside Out, and Soul. Under the A category, or the A tier, we have Toy Story, Toy Story 4, and The Incredibles. Under the B, we have Monsters Incorporated, Cars 3, Coco, and Incredibles 2. Under the C category, where we're definitely starting to get to the point where there's other things I'd rather watch, we have A Bug's Life, Cars, Brave, Toy Story 3, and Onward. And D is when I really would rather be watching other things. We have Monsters University and The Good Dinosaur and Finding Dory. Under F, where I would much rather be doing anything else, Cars 2. Which, by the way, I have never watched Cars 2 a third time. I didn't even get through the second time. So, anyway, Pixar, when they started out, was just on fire and creating classic after classic after classic, and that's why they have so many S-tier movies. As you can see, the quality has evened out a little bit. Now, the next time we do one of these tiers lists, I think we're going to do DreamWorks, because DreamWorks has more than 35 movies since inception, And I think that might be worth looking at. So anyway, I would like to know, what do you think of this list? Do you have any disagreements? Please feel free to comment below respectfully and share what you would have placed or what you might have done a little differently. Maybe you agree, but maybe you don't agree with the reasons, or, vice versa. I'd love to know. So comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.